Welcome, everyone. Today we are talking about owning your own career and a leader's role in that. And with me for that conversation today is Andy Storch, author of Own Your Career, Own Your Life, speaker, podcaster, cyclist, expat living in Spain, all around great guy. Andy, welcome to the podcast today.
Well, Kent, thank you so much. It's cool that we met not that long ago, just a few months back, and we've gotten to know each other pretty well already. And you know all the things that I'm known for. Let's see what we can get into this in this session.
I think we can almost see all the things I talked about in the background, including your bike, but we'll see what the final video version looks like. I love to just start with, because I just feel it's interesting for people to hear career paths. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about your career path and how you ended up doing what you're doing today.
Well, yeah, my career path has been meandering and winding with lots of stops and starts, like many people, right? Especially in the corporate world. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. That was my dream. I grew up playing lots of sports, especially baseball, and I talk about that in my book and often in my keynotes because I was a decent player, but not that great. I never really had a clear plan for how I was going to get there, and I ended up quitting at 15, which is a bit of a mindset issue that I get into, which I changed later on. And then I really thought I wanted to be a civil engineer. I was really into roads and bridges in high school and did well in calculus and physics. But when I got to college, I ran into chemistry class. And even though chemistry is not really needed to be a civil engineer, it was like one requirement and I just couldn't do it. Partly because my mind is more geared for physics and calculus and less geared for chemistry, and also because I joined a fraternity and I was out partying every night. So it's sort of like a combination between those things. I ended up switching majors. I got into more of like computers and business, but I was still really just kind of having fun. And I took the only job I could find out of college, which was like a management training program at a retailer, not something I really enjoyed. And then I kind of discovered this idea of entrepreneurship, and I tried my hand at a couple of different startup ideas, nothing that really worked very well, bounced around at some different jobs, ended up moving from Florida, where I grew up, to California, Southern California, with my fiance at the time, now wife, because she wanted to get into TV and I wanted to just live somewhere else. And I, again, tried a few different startups because I thought I wanted to be some type of entrepreneur connected with that. Nothing really worked out too well. So a friend got me a job in the insurance industry. I ended up going back to school to get my MBA because I wasn't terribly happy or fulfilled. And then I got a lucky break one day, and a friend connected me with a job with an insurance with a consulting company called BTS, which was sort of my foray into the training and development space. Because even though they called it consulting, we were building and running custom business simulations for companies around the world. And it ended up being kind of a dream job for me because I discovered these strengths that I didn't know I had before, like speaking in front of a room, facilitating workshops, talking to people, connecting with people, networking. I had started to get really into, but I never had a job that really connected to that or where I benefited from my ability to do that. I had been in these analytical jobs before that were all based on like being good at spreadsheets and stuff that I was okay at, but not great. And so I was often frustrated. And then, so I was doing fairly well, enjoying that job, traveling all over the world. And I really got a chance to work with lots of different leaders, big companies. I learned a lot about strategy, about business acumen, about success, about leadership. I also observed a lot of people kind of drifting through their careers, operating in reaction mode, waiting for someone to tell them what to do or where to go. And not to say that they couldn't be quote unquote successful, move up the ladder, right, make more money, get into a VP position in a company. But that doesn't mean they were always happy. In fact, many of them I felt like were not. And so I filed that away. And as I started to get drawn back into the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, really starting in 2016, I discovered the world of personal development. I started doing a lot of self-reflection, a lot of reading and studying and listening to podcasts like this one to learn as much as I can about all the things that were out there. And I got drawn back into this idea of being an entrepreneur because I think I have a strong value towards like autonomy and independence and things like that. I realized through doing that work and building a business around my strengths and then talking to clients about it in the corporate space that not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but I think everybody does want to feel like they're happy and fulfilled in their career. And my theory is that most people have a better chance of feeling happy and fulfilled if they're taking ownership of their career, if they're being intentional with what they're doing, where they're going. And so
Mhm.
I felt like with all the work that I did, the studying I did, I had a framework that I could use to help other people with that. And thus my book was born, Own Your Career, Own Your Life, which I wrote and published in 2020. And I've been building a career and a business around the book and my content and the things that I know. And I believe I can help other people with ever since then.
Nice. Nice. I like it. I had I feel like we have a couple points of similarity in our path. I think I fell into sort of the leadership development and, you know, talent management space a little faster, but I did a couple years stint in back office insurance, not
Yeah.
sales, but in the back office before weirdly starting my career in consulting.
Huh.
You know, before then going into HR and back to consulting. But I think I've had that similar draw back to, you know, the consulting space. So I want to start pivoting us into the topic because interestingly, I think what's fascinated me about your book and what you talk about quite a bit around owning your own career is my own observations from particularly my time in HR.
Mm.
You know, in a couple of the positions I've had were in pretty old companies who had, you know, been around for a long time. And I would say an interesting similarity between my prior, you know, two prior employers to now, interestingly, was this mentality of or this culture, originating culture of sort of waiting to be tapped on the shoulder and told, you know, what your next role was going to be or
Right.
what you should do next. And seeing both of these organizations at different stages in their recent maturity kind of open up and try to make this or make, not just try, but make this pivot from you're waiting around to be tapped on the shoulder to encouraging employees to own your own career, having an actual system where they can apply to jobs internally. So I've definitely been a part of, on the inside, you know, trying to encourage this own your own career
Right.
mentality. So what kind of, I mean, I think your own career story of trying a lot of things probably was part of what brought you to this, but I'd be curious, you know, what other things sort of led you into thinking about and writing and now speaking about this topic?
Yeah. Well, you're right in that I think a lot of companies are starting to say we want our people to own their careers. We want more career mobility. That is, if they're a larger company, let's say with at least 3, 5, 10,000 employees, we want people to move around and take on different roles. That way they feel like they're getting lots of different opportunities for different types of careers, but they stay under one roof and keep their knowledge here. The problem is you can create all the resources in the world, but if you don't teach and show people how to take ownership, how to be intentional, how to go out using those resources, they won't matter. And you know that from being, you know, inside, of course. What I observed, you know, especially going back to my consulting days, is that just as you said, a lot of people have, you know, grown up and been taught that the way you are successful in life is that you work hard and you put your head down and you wait for someone to reward you for that. And you don't brag about the work that you've done because nobody likes, you know, a boastful person with a big ego, that sort of thing. But the problem is, and that does work sometimes, but the problem is a lot of times we're either not recognized for the work we're doing because, you know, someone else gets the credit or the boss is really busy and doesn't notice. Another big problem is that, and I hear this all the time from leaders, from managers, the reason they don't sit down and have a career conversation with the person on their team is because they think, well, I don't have a promotion for them, so I'm not going to have this conversation. But it might be that the person on the other end of the, you know, the other side doesn't want a promotion. They actually want to do something completely different. And nobody knows what they want or what you want until you're willing to have that conversation, right? To be proactive and come to your manager and say, yeah, I work in sales or I work in IT now, but I really love the people side of things. I'm kind of interested in getting to HR. No one would know that unless you spoke up and had that conversation. And so a lot of people don't know what you want. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world. There's a lot of distractions. And so more and more, I think it's really important that people think about building their personal brand, which is in the middle part of my book. I talk about 3 things you can always be doing to set yourself up for future success. The first is investing in continuous learning. The second is building your network. And the third is building your personal brand, because we can't rely on just doing great work, working hard, and hoping that somebody notices. We've got to think about how do we make sure that we are recognized for the things that we've done, for the things that we know, for our talents and our skills. And if you're lucky, you have a great manager who recognizes your strengths and creates some type of role for you around those strengths. But I've had roles in the past, going back to my time in the insurance industry, where I recognized my own strengths and I went to my manager and said, hey, can we create something where I can leverage more of my strengths? And he said something to the effect of, no, your job is X, analyzing spreadsheets. I don't care if you're good with people. Get back to work analyzing spreadsheets. And not every manager is like that, but most are kind of, I think, in the middle, where they're not really going to recognize that because they're just not thinking about it until you speak up and say, hey, I really enjoy doing this type of work. Can I do more of that work? Which will benefit both me and the organization.
I like that. And you've hit on a couple things here that I want to dig into. For folks out there who are working on their leadership skills, right, and becoming great leaders, better leaders, we get into having good career and development conversations with people. And the first thing you said was around, leaders feeling like, well, I don't have a promotion. And I think along a similar vein, I hear leaders say, have this hesitance around having certain career conversations given fear of like, I don't want to make promises that I can't keep. Right. And I think I've certainly counseled around, well, you don't need to make a promise. Right. You can actually be quite transparent and say, what you can and can't promise and
right.
But I'd be curious sort of when you think about the role that leaders can play in having at least these initial transparent conversations, what are some of the things that you're thinking about and talking to companies about?
Well, I think that for leaders, first of all, my philosophy on leadership is that leadership at its core is all about enabling and empowering people to succeed, both in their jobs today and their career long term. Now, just about every manager, every boss says like, sure, I want my people to be successful in their job today because I want the job to be successful. So it reflects well on me. The worst of the lot, of course, are not even wanting their people to be successful in that job. But the best managers and leaders are also thinking about how do I help my people be successful long-term in their careers, even if that means leaving my team and doing something different outside of this company or inside of this company, something that they love. Because if they do that, they're going to remember me fondly. It's going to reflect well on my personal brand and my reputation. More people are going to want to work for me. And quite frankly, it's an important part of your legacy that you are helping other people, which I think that's what leadership is all about, right? The problem is, like you said, a lot of managers are maybe afraid to have that conversation because they think, well, I don't know if I don't have a promotion for them. I don't have the answer for them. I don't want to promise anything.
I don't think they can get, or like, I don't think they can get there.
Yeah. Or I don't think that they're good enough for it. It is a hard conversation to have, but what I always remind people is like, you got to start first and foremost with curiosity and empathy. If you just lead with curiosity, right? Many people know the book, The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay-Stanier, who's a friend of mine, been on my podcast multiple times. He talks about quelling the advice monster and not trying to speak too much and just lead with curiosity. Right. Ask the question, how do you feel things are going, Kent? Like, where do you see yourself going in your career? What would you like to be doing more of? What would you really like to be doing one day? And they might say something that you can't help with, or you don't think that they're capable of. And then you can say, well, I don't know how to help you get there, or let's see if we can find that out together. Or it's great that you want to be a manager one day. Quite frankly, I don't feel like you're quite meeting the expectations for that right yet, but let's put a plan together to help you get there now that we've had that conversation, right? Let's talk about how we could potentially make that possible, or maybe it's not possible. And, let's talk about other options. But the worst thing you can do is just have no conversation at all, right? Because so many people are afraid. I think one of the biggest problems with managers and leaders today is they feel like they have to have all the answers, when you and I know that's absolutely not true. And in fact, I think more and more when I ask people about what they want from leaders, from their manager, they tell me things like, I want them to be more human. I just want to know that I'm working for a real person. I want them to be honest and authentic. And it's okay to say, hey, I don't have all the answers to this, but that's actually why we have this team here. That's why I have you. Like, let's look into this together. so that it doesn't rely entirely on you. And like, let's figure out a plan. And just remember, the goal is to enable and empower people to be successful both on their job today and their career long term. And if you keep that as kind of your North Star, and it doesn't mean just nice and fluffy, right? Like do whatever you can to help people, and it doesn't matter. Like obviously we have a job to get done. We have goals. Accountability is really, really important. But also always just thinking, how can I help people be successful long term? It's going to benefit everybody so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it does require some level of courage
Yes.
for a leader to be honest,
Agreed.
right? However, I would also argue if there is feedback to someone about how you're not seeing whatever the skills are or performance level that's aligned with what they're telling you is where they want to go, there's probably some feedback in there that you should be providing whether or not you're having a career conversation, right? So on the one hand, while there's like some courage that's required, I would also just go so far as to say it's kind of your job to be able to, provide that feedback.
That's right.
And yeah, don't make a promise. And I like how you're putting that, because it's very similar to what I tell to leaders, what I say to leaders too, which is there's a really interesting conversation to have in there if someone's telling you, here's what I want to do, for you to say, today I'm not seeing that, right? And why is it? Is it a specific experience set?
Yeah.
Is it, you have not been in the field, right? Yeah. Or is it a performance issue? I'm not seeing that level of hustle.
Yeah.
Today, that's typically required. Interestingly, one place that I've taken it to is, and I'd be curious what your reaction to this is I kind of, even in an internal role, I have leaned in on competition, right? Like, let's talk about what happens when an opening comes around is there's multiple people applying for it, and what would make you the most competitive applicant, right? And I think
on them,
putting it back on them a little bit. I'd be curious, do you lean in on that?
I think that's a good way to go, because I would want to come back, because you don't want to give advice unless they're asking for it. I think you want to be realistic, right? If people ask for something that is not quite possible right away. At the same time, I don't ever want to crush anybody's dreams either. So let's talk about what's possible. Like if you told me, Kent, right now, hey, my goal is for my podcast to be #1 in the world at the end of the next year, and I want to have Adam Grant on as my next guest. I'd be like,
how did you know?
Listen, given that you just started a few months ago, right? And my estimation is your level of investment in this is similar to mine, which is you're serious about it, but you're not investing thousands of dollars in a production studio and all this stuff. To me, that the goals feel a little bit unlikely, but it's not impossible. Let's talk about, how are you going to get Adam Grant? I mean, you got me, so that's a pretty nice step, right? Towards, but
I think so.
How are you going to make the next step to someone who charges, let's say, 6 times what I do for a keynote talk, and is infinitely more popular? It's, again, not impossible if you have the right connection. Let's talk about how we could get there. What do you think needs to be done? And similar with okay, you want to move to HR, you want to get a promotion next year. How do you think you stack up right now? What do you think is possible? And unfortunately, some people are delusional, right? They'll be like, well, I think I'm doing a great job. And you're like, well, let's look at the track record and see.
Right.
And let's talk about this. And of course, there are going to be some hard conversations. And you do have to have some courage, and you do have to get past some of the awkwardness sometimes. Yeah. But that is part of being a manager, being a leader in this world.
Yeah. Well, and I think more and more I find that your immediate supervisor usually is not the person who's making the call on that next step, right? If you are interested. So I think I think leaders need to also give themselves permission to say, I'm not the one who's going to make that decision, but let me talk to you about how do I help you with the time that we have together, make you as competitive as we can. Right.
But the thing is, I think so often we're, a lot of times leaders or managers are afraid, well, I don't want to go into this because I don't have a promotion for them, because we assume that everybody wants to move up. But I mean, you know this, Kent. You've been more than 50% of the people you talk to are going to say, when you ask, what do you want to do in your career? They're going to say something to the effect of, well, I'm pretty happy doing this work. If I could do a little bit more that leverages my strengths, get a raise every year, and not work more than 50 hours a week so that I can, spend time with my family, I'm pretty happy. A lot of people don't want to move into a manager role. They don't want more responsibility, right? That's only for certain people. So not everybody is looking for that promotion. Everybody wants different things. And that's why you got to start with the curiosity and ask, what do you want to do in your career.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I would say coming out of the pandemic too, and perhaps the research is still early on this, but we're also hearing, that people are starting to opt out of leadership a little bit, right? That this um, crucible experience, right, that everybody went through trying to balance
Yeah.
everything, working from home, you know, all of that it opened up a lot of people's eyes to what equals just life fulfillment and not
Mhm.
just job fulfillment. So I think some people are even, starting to consciously step off the leadership track essentially. And on top of that, I would say to, the HR folks listening, I think we can all admit that, especially when you're early on in your HR career, the concept that not everybody wants to be promoted and is interested in career growth can sometimes be feel like kind of the antithesis of everything that we're doing and talking about. But it's like, yeah, but I mean, there's billions of people out there. There's lots of roles out there. We need all of them
Right.
done. And if every single person and every single individual contributor role
Yeah.
wanted onto the leadership track, first of all, we'd have to have a whole lot more hard conversations
Right.
because there's only so many roles and it's fewer every level up.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's always this needing to remember that, yeah, not everybody wants or even has the same level of desire for promotion or the same level they're looking at for promotion eventually. But you said one thing I want to come back to, which I think is really important too. And certainly in my own career coaching, I've leveraged this, but I think for leaders out there who are coaching or even career coaches out there who are coaching is to for career coaching perspectives is, and I think you've leaned into this. I want to pick on it because I have a feeling you've got a thought and opinion on this, which is really getting into, let's step away from the roles and the title conversation for a minute, the level conversations, and let's talk about what you like. What is it that you're good at? What are you not good at? What are the things you tend to avoid? What's there to learn from the things you're avoiding?
Right.
To have more of this, like, let's talk about the elements, what you do day in and day out, and maybe start to piece it together, in the Lego bricks that way to kind of think about what you might want to do.
100%. I mean, I start my book and my keynotes with the foundation to owning your career is first and foremost in taking full responsibility for your career and your life, right? And not outsourcing that to other people. But second of all is in self-awareness, and self-awareness starts with self-reflection, which is taking time to really get to know yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, your energizers, what you care about, what you love about your career, what you don't like, what you might want to do differently. And in this super quote busy world where we've got like distractions all the time, right? Text messages, social media notifications, emails, plenty of work to do. If you have a significant other and you have pets and you have kids and like they always want things from you, and social media, there's always things to do. And so rarely people take time to just sit and reflect. But it's a good exercise to sit down and think about what are those things that you're good at and you're not good at. And by the way, everybody knows what their weaknesses are. Most people don't take time to really acknowledge their strengths. And one of the reasons is, again, we were taught not to brag. We were taught to humility is a value, right?
Yeah.
But it's really valuable to know what your strengths are and to recognize those. And so when people do say, hey, Kent, like you're really good at this thing. Like I really admire how you synthesize these things or how you coach people, instead of just saying, well, I'm really lucky, or people think if I'm good at something, then everybody must be good at it. But it's not true. We all have strengths, just like we all have weaknesses, right? So I know the things that I'm good at. I know what my limitations are. And when you know your strengths, then you can start to maybe build a career that's a little bit more based around those. For example, earlier in my career, I was in analytical roles and I was using Excel a lot. And I'm decent with a spreadsheet, but I wouldn't say it's like one of my big strengths. At the same time, I was like always organizing lunches and happy hours with people, right? And so one of my strengths is in connecting and networking, building relationships. The problem at that time was I was in a role where it wasn't valued. And I actually thought that it was something that was almost a weakness in my career, that I couldn't get myself to just sit down and focus. Like every hour I had to talk to somebody. And it was causing problems for me. And I thought this is something that's always going to hold me back in my career, until one day I changed and I built a business and a career around my strengths. And now I talk to people all day, all the time. And I love doing it. And it sometimes adds value to other people too, right? When I'm speaking or running a program or something like that, it just took a little while to recognize that and to say, hey, maybe I need to pivot and do something a little bit different that leverages those strengths. And for some people, that might be a complete career shift, like it kind of was for me. For others, it might be just going to your manager and saying, hey, I'm doing XYZ right now. Can we shift this? Is it possible to shift this 10%? So I'm spending a little bit more time. Maybe you're the opposite of me, right? And you love spreadsheets. You don't like talking to people. Hey, can I skip those meetings and just spend more time doing analytical work? I feel like I don't add any value in those meetings anyway. I'll just give you a report. They might be like, yeah, cool. Sounds good. You're really good at the spreadsheets, whatever it is, but you don't know until you have those conversations. And it's the flip for managers. I think some of the best leaders and managers out there are observing their people and recognizing what are the strengths that they don't even know they have, so they can tap into those more. So I mentioned earlier, I had a manager where I recognized my strengths. I went to him, asked if I could spend more time in the field doing people stuff. And he said, no, your job is spreadsheets, get back to work. Later on, when I was consulting, I worked for a woman named Jessica Scone, and she was my boss's boss. We had a hard conversation one time where I wasn't getting a promotion because I didn't meet certain requirements. But at the same time, she recognized some strengths in me that I didn't even realize I had on the sales side. And she offered me and actually created a new role just for me based around my strengths. And I ended up thriving there for a couple more years because she had done that. And because of that, I wrote about Jessica in my book. I mention her sometimes in keynotes as the best leader I've ever worked for. And the other guy, I don't mention him by name at all, right? They both have a reputation in my mind. One person who held me back and the other person who accelerated my career success. And so, I posit this to leaders, like, which one do you want to be, right? What do you want your legacy to be? Do you want it to be the person, the leader that people remember because you helped them accelerate in their career, or the one that held them back because you just wanted to get that job done that day?
I love that. And I would say, because I've worked in companies big and small, and I would encourage leaders to, don't let size, policy, what you assume to be red tape stop you, right? Like, as much as you're saying today, Andy, to kind of lean into these career conversations from a place of curiosity, lean into the conversations you need to have with your leaders, your HR business partners, also with curiosity, right? And say, what could be done? This person has, really great strengths in these areas, maybe isn't a great fit, for this exact role today, but they'd be a shame, to lose out on all the other ways that this person could contribute, right? So lean into those conversations with curiosity. You said something a couple times I want to come to, which is because I've done some work in the DEI space around sponsorship, right? And how do you, which essentially for the listener, if you're not familiar with sponsorship is, in a nutshell, it's who's talking about you positively in rooms you're not in,
right? Looking out for you in your career,
looking out for you, advocating for opportunities. And one thing in these sponsorship programs that we've looked at is, well, sometimes, when we are assigning you a sponsor to get to know and put you on a pathway to future sponsorship, sometimes we're connecting you with someone who doesn't know you that well and might not know your work product. So the connection in my brain to what you were saying was, we don't want to brag, right? Yeah. But people do need to know about your wins, right? Yeah. And the things you're good at, the numbers you've put on the board. So I'd be curious. I just want to have you kind of dig in on that a little bit, because I'm assuming, given the number of times you've mentioned it, that you've got some thoughts on, how do you toot your own horn? Yeah. How and when, right?
Well, it's a balance, because people don't like others who brag, right? We don't like people who think they're better than us. And, but we want to know what people are good at and what they're capable of. And so if I ask you, Kent, like, hey, what are you really good at? I want to be able to refer you or support you in your business. I don't want you to just say, well, I'm not that good at anything. Like, it's humble, but it doesn't help me at all, right? I'd rather you. So one question I might ask, or a question you could ask yourself, is, what are you really proud of, right? In your career, what are you really proud of? What have you accomplished that you're really proud of? And you can say, well, I'm really proud of this project that I completed because I put a lot of effort into it, and I felt like we did a really great job with it. We exceeded all the expectations, and I had help from my team, but I was a big part of this, and I led this team, or I worked on this part of it. I'm really proud that I'm leading this meeting every Thursday, and people seem to feel like it's engaging. Again, without coming up and saying like, I'm the best in the world, because nobody likes that.
Mhm.
But can you say, I'm really proud that I've accomplished these things, that I've developed strong skills in these areas? I'm really proud personally that I've published a book, I've built a business around it, I've spoken on stages and in front of thousands of people, that I've hosted a podcast for 7 years and published over 1,000 episodes. Do I think I'm the best podcaster in the world or the best speaker in the world? No, I'm always learning. I'm always trying to get better. But I'm very proud of these things that I've accomplished. And I want to be known as an expert in career development. I want to be known as a great keynote speaker. I want to be known a bit as a cyclist, even though when I go out cycling, you mentioned it earlier, when I go out cycling with other people, I'm usually one of the slower ones, but at least I'm out there doing it. And I don't mind people knowing about it. It's part of my personal brand. It's part of who I am. Right. And so I think we can talk about the things that we do, the things that we like doing, the things that we're good at, the things that we want to be recognized for and known for, and say, yeah, like I'm proud of the things that I've accomplished, without going too far and saying, oh, I'm the best in the world at it and I'm better than you. Like, you're not going to say that, but I think you're allowed to be proud of things. And I think people like that. I think they appreciate that.
I like that. That's a good angle. And it sounds even like, when you think about interview prep, right? When you're interviewing for a job, internally or externally, right? You need to be able to talk about what you've accomplished. And I like the angle that you've put on it around like, what are you proud of, right?
Yeah.
How can you talk about like things you've done, what you're really proud of having accomplished? So I think that's a great angle to put on it, right? Because I think, I find people over index on being humble internally and not talking about, what are some of the things that they've done, the metaphorical or real, if you're in sales, right? Numbers that you've put on the board. But if you're relying on others to always tell your story for you, you might be outsourcing too much of that, right? And so finding those opportunistic and appropriate, right, moments, especially when you're thinking about senior leaders in the organization who may have a hand in your future, right?
Yeah. And the other thing you do, connect it back to the strengths. And I've done a lot of work on this for myself because I used to have a hard time both giving and receiving compliments. And it's to notice when people compliment you on certain things and practice accepting it and just saying thank you instead of, right? Instead of, pushing it off and be like, well, I just got lucky. Like, oh, Kent, Andy, you did a really great job on this thing. Nah, I just got lucky. I had a team. Great. I got lucky and I was on a great team, right? And that might be the case, but maybe you did work hard on it. You could just say, thank you. I worked really hard on that. Thank you. This is a skill that I've been developing for a long time, or, whatever it is. Like sometimes you might be lucky, but just acknowledge that you did do work on that and say thank you. And I think people appreciate that too, because I've also heard that when you sort of push off a compliment from somebody, it's like someone wrapping a gift and giving it to you and you're like, I don't want that. And you're just like, you just bat it away. I want people to receive the compliments that I give to them. And so I try to get better at receiving compliments people give to me.
I love that. And I've kind of done the same thing, which is, and I think part of the struggle for me was like, well, I don't know what to say when someone's
awkward.
Complimenting me. But I found it like the more I've just kept it simple and just said like, oh, thanks, like even just that, right? Like has made it easier to both personally accept a compliment, which may or may not be difficult for me. But also just because I think to your point, right? Acknowledging that this person is taking a moment to praise you and,
and it's awkward because we don't like being put on a pedestal, but if you want to disengage, if you want to lessen the awkwardness, give a compliment back. You're like, oh yeah, I thought you did a great job on this thing too. And now we're both elevated. It's all good.
Yeah. So as you're out there speaking about your book, when they're coming to you, where are they at usually? And what are some of your observations that you're seeing as you're kind of bringing this message to some of the organizations you're speaking and consulting with?
Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think a lot of companies are, especially I work primarily with larger companies, we'll say, 5,000 plus employees, are setting a goal to create more talent mobility, right? Career mobility, wanting people to take on different roles within an organization. And they might be investing in the tools behind that, or a platform like an AI powered platform where you can go in and put in your skills and it'll tell you, here's where you are today. You're at marketing analyst 2 and you want to get to marketing manager. Here's the things that you need to do. And that's really cool. So there's a lot of technology that companies can invest in, platforms. Fuel 50 is an example of one. I think Workday has a platform, and there's plenty of others out there. The two challenges that go along with that are, one, the mindset side of things, like we talked about, where you want your people to actually be intentional and thoughtful about what they want to do, where they want to go, and take advantage of those resources. And then the other one is what you talk about a lot is like, are the leaders supporting people? In other words, like, you want mobility, but if all your leaders want is to protect and keep their people, then you've got conflict, right? You've got a conflict of interest. Right. So you also need to build it into the messaging and the culture that you've built with among leaders and managers in your organization that say, we want what's best for our employees and what's best for the organization. And I don't care. I mean, I care. I love the people I work with, but I'm not going to quote unquote hoard them. If you ever read Multipliers by Liz Weissman, talent hoarders versus talent multipliers. I'm not going to hoard them just because it's going to make my job easier. I'm going to do what's best for them and do what's best for the organization. And that's going to benefit everyone. It's going to benefit me as well. So I think companies want more talent mobility. They want people to take more ownership of their career, to like take the driver's seat, the primary role in driving their career. I think we're seeing a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Flatter organizations, less hierarchy, less promotions are available. So companies want our people to figure out other ways, get creative in how they can grow in their careers by taking on different types of roles and projects, learning and things like that. And then, of course, we can't ignore the fact that AI is coming in and changing the way people work in a lot of organizations. And so I'm starting to hear people and companies say to me, like, we want to figure out how to encourage our people to use AI more so they can use it more in the business. And hopefully it makes them better and it makes the organization better and everybody gets to keep their jobs or do something more elevated or different. I have no idea where things are going to go. It's a whole nother conversation, right? But I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out, okay, how do we encourage our people to use that more? And to me, a lot of that comes down to mindset, developing more of a growth mindset, being willing to try different things and fail at stuff and learn from that experience and keep going.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. I've had at least one leader, and I've seen personally, and then I've seen this happen somewhat infrequently, but I just want to reiterate, the point you're making around kind of multipliers, right? And what's interesting is these leaders who, and I had a leader like this who really, like, one of their goals is to be an exporter of talent from their team.
I like it.
Actually have people scrambling to get on the team, right, over time. Like when that reputation builds up, they have no problem filling roles that are open on their team, right? So even though there's this fear of, I don't want to lose my talent, right? When you can make it a part of the story and even just the mini sort of employee value proposition of being on your team, right? You actually end up struggling less than others, right? Filling, because people will want to be on that team, right? They'll see that they're cared for and that it's a career accelerator, being on your team. So I think it's a great point and a great aspiration that I've seen fewer than I'd like, right? Leaders sort of take that on. Okay, I'm going to give us a shove into the advice column. So as we're kind of wrapping up today, so what's your advice for leaders out there? I know we've kind of talked a fair amount about it, but if you had to give one piece of advice that leaders could take away from today and do something with.
Yeah, I'm going to double down on what we talked about. I think it's thinking long-term and leading with curiosity and empathy, right? Starting with asking questions instead of just jumping in and telling people what they want or assuming what they want, and thinking long-term about how can I set this person up for success long-term? What can I do to set the company up for long-term success? And believing or having faith that is also going to benefit you in your career as well. I think those are the biggest things. And then secondarily, I'm big on, creating kind of an inclusive environment or helping people feel like they belong on the team that they're working on. I think that's going to encourage them to try new things, to get more creative, to drive more innovation, and to be more productive and engaged as well.
Nice. And so what would your advice be for those who are supporting leaders, right? Who are either, helping leaders step up their game in some way? What's your advice for those? That could be HR, that could be senior leaders.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest things for managers and leaders today is that they're being asked to still do a job as an implementer a lot of the time, and also lead their people. So it would be to try to give space to those leaders and remind them that their primary role, it depends on the company and the job description and all that stuff, but the primary role is to lead their people, to enable and empower them to succeed. So it's really important to make time for those one-on-ones, for the team meetings, for those career conversations, to make yourself available to people, and to try to keep thinking about and figuring out more ways to delegate, to challenge, to push people to accomplish more, and not try to do the work yourself, to get away from micromanaging as much as possible and get the work done through your team. Remind them they don't have to have all the answers, right? And that it's okay to just be human and focus on just leading and enabling other people to get the job done. And if they do, that will reflect well on you.
Yeah, love it. So as we're kind of, the final piece here is for those that want more Andy Storch in their life, how do they get a hold of you? What and what should they be reaching out to you for?
And who doesn't want that? So I'm all over the place. I post on LinkedIn almost every day. So make sure you connect with me there. If you're a podcast listener, especially if you're in the HR or talent development space, I have a podcast called the Talent Development Hot Seat that I've been publishing weekly since 2017. We're almost up to 600 episodes on that. Wow. With lots of great people on there. And then I also speak in organizations. I've got some bonus resources on my website. If you go to andystorch.com/bonus, you can download my 5 steps to owning your career, some other bonus resources, including the 3 questions to ask anytime. Actually, it's 5 questions now to ask anytime you face a difficult situation or a challenge, and a lot more. So andystorch.com/bonus.
Awesome. Cool. Andy, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. I think it's a really important topic, as I've sort of faced it at every company I've worked with. So I'm just excited to have you here to talk about owning your own career. And I love it. I love the book title, Owning Your Life.
Well, thank you, Kent. I love what you're doing. I love how you're helping people. And I really appreciate you having me on the show.
All right. Thanks.